started with the introduction. Thank you so much for joining me today for another Chronos Hub webinar on author engagement outside of the publishing process. My name is Romy Beard. I'm the head of publisher relations here at Chronos Hub. And today I'm joined by my three guest speakers: Claire Moulton, publisher at the Company of Biologists; Jennifer Regala, Director of Publishing and Executive Editor at the American Neurological Association; and Paul Killoran, Founder and CEO at Exordo. And we're here today to talk about author engagement outside of the publishing process, so not directly within the workflow, which is a lot of what I've talked about in the past. And that's really come about because a lot of those conversations I've had with publishers have kind of gone in different direction, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about different initiatives on how we can engage authors and create that sense of community before they even submit an article and also after they've published an article. And our panelists here will share different initiatives that they've done at their organizations. So we'll do very quick introductions at the start. They'll each get a few minutes just to introduce themselves and their position before we dive into a discussion. As usual, please feel free to post questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll bring those into the conversation. The webinar is also being recorded and we make the slides available afterwards. So if you can't join us live and you're watching this later, thank you for watching. So just by way of introduction, you've probably heard a lot of talk about author experience and how it relates to different interactions with authors during the publishing process. And as I said, that's usually where I focused my discussions with publishers, because that's where Chronos Hub as a platform sits. But really, it starts way before an article is even submitted to a platform and also afterwards. So what we're looking at today is actually what kind of sits outside of this, although we'll probably touch a little bit about the process in the middle as well. But just defining by excluding to start us off in a way. So we'll start off with Paul Killoran. Paul is the founder and CEO Exordo, an events company. And Paul, you're going to tell us a little bit about your vision for scholarly publishing and how publishers can use their events data to engage authors.
Absolutely, Romy. Great to be here. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and listening to me speak. So as Romy mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Exordo. Exordo is a scholarly events platform. And so we handle all the workflows for conference submission, peer review, registration, program, streaming, mobile, and so forth. Our platform is specifically designed for the scholarly industry, which makes us unique within the event space. So I suppose that's just by way of a background as to what our company does, but that's why Romy has invited me to speak here, because I have a unique view, I guess, on ways in which we can engage with the authors outside of the primary, we'll call it, publishing process, because conference would be secondary, obviously. I think, looking at the question that we were looking today, who are your authors, and how do you engage with them outside of the traditional way we publish? I'm sure you're here thinking of, give me new ideas, new systems, new constructs, new things that I can sort of steal from my own way. And the emphasis is very much on new. The thing that sort of strikes me and that I'm sort of blue in the face is advocating for events, because Romy, I don't know if you've got that slide there, lovely. Yeah, you do. So this is a slide that helps me to capture how I think about the scholarly event. And when I say event, I mean everything from a conference to a webinar to a journal club and everything in between. Because effectively, events, naturally what they do is they are the embodiment of the research community. So if you think about it today, we have, a couple of hundred people on this webinar. We are engaging with the scholarly publishing community in a meaningful way. And so when I look at this model, this graphic, everywhere along the journey that publishing journey that an author will go, there is a place and a role for conferences, whether that is initially when they're preparing and conducting their research and having conversations with other authors, or they're actually publishing maybe their first version at a conference through proceedings, to discovering what's out there, because a lot of the stuff that we see at conferences is not necessarily tied to that final journal article. And I suppose for me, what I find really powerful about events is that they effectively model that community model. So everybody that's here today, we know who's joined. We may know if you get fed up listening to me when you leave, but we know that you're certainly engaged or interested in author engagement. And so that's a really powerful data point for us to have. And so when I look at the whole conference workflow, what I essentially see is a data model of the community, and ways in which we can understand in ways that you can't really get on social media about, because conferences will tell you what people are interested in. It'll tell you what the hot topics are. It'll tell you what the up and coming speakers are. So there's a whole lot of data points in that. And for me, the vision that Rami touched on there was when the pandemic first occurred and everything went digital. I'm not advocating that we should all flip to virtual meetings only, because I don't think that's necessarily the solution. But the vision that I had was that societies would still continue to have that one big annual event, but throughout the year, they would continue to engage with their communities in the way that we're doing right now, through webinars, through journal clubs, and so forth. And that we would continue and maintain that conversation throughout the year, so that you as a society, as a lighthouse for them, remain in their lives. And so the anecdote that I sometimes use when talking to societies is, I like to think of, if you think of Netflix, right? I pay whatever, $12 a month for my Netflix subscription because it provides value to me on a daily basis. It has all the shows that my kids want to watch. It's got the series that I want to watch. And anytime I turn on my television, I go straight to Netflix because that is my home. And what I say to societies, as the guardians of content, you should also provide content in a way, whether that's, as I said, through webinars, journal clubs, big conferences, small conferences, workshops, no matter what, in ways that engage your audience and bring them in and put you front and center as their home for their research. And I think events are the best way of doing that. Now, I'm going to stop there because I could keep talking for the entire hour, but I think it's only fair that I let other people speak.
Thanks so much for the introduction. And I'll hand over next to Jennifer, who's written a really interesting article on the kind of personal involvement with author and the kind of personal approach. So that's what she'll talk about briefly. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me today. And wow, talk about stage fright. It's so great to see so many wonderful people. Some I know and some I don't. So thanks for joining us today, because I think this conversation is really important and something that we should be talking about more often. So I am Jennifer Regala. I'm the Director of Publications at the American Urological Association. That includes 3 peer-reviewed journals, the Journal of Urology, our flagship journal, Urology Practice, which is a smaller practice-based journal, and JU Open Plus, our brand new gold open access journal. It's my little baby, and she just turned a year old in January. So I'm very passionate. Probably the most important and favorite part of my job is focusing in on our authors and what the AUA author journey looks like, and making that really meaningful, and making our journal family, we call it the Voice of Urology, making that Voice of Urology a community. It's not just a place to, stick your research and forget about it. It's a place to publish, but you are a part of that community, and all are welcome. And we want to have a year-round, to Paul's point, conversation. We don't want you just publishing with us and then vanishing off of our radar. So my general philosophy in life, and it applies really well here to our publications, is that it's free to be nice and to comb your hair. And I think we can all agree in this world today, it's challenging sometimes to find the nice and to find the good. And that really resonates with people. If you're genuine and you're kind and you're just really willing to listen, if you're willing to accept criticism and feedback, if you're willing to work with people and try new things, people really like that. That resonates with them, and they want to feel like they're part of something. I think that's why all of us love scholarly publishing so much, because we all feel like we're included here and we feel welcomed, whether we're a vendor, whether we're working in an editorial office, whether we're a librarian, no matter what we are, we do feel like we're really connected with one another. And that's exactly what I've seen in my time at the American Urological Association. At the AUA, for our publications team, we work really hard, and this is across all of our editorial boards. It's across our entire editorial office, and it's across our teams within the AUA too, our Office of Research, our membership teams, our Office of Education, you name it. We strive to be #1 in what I call lowercase impact. And again, that's a different webinar for a different day. Journal impact factor, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an impact that we can make on the community with what we publish and how we get that published word out into the world and how we continue to tell that story to the urological world, both before publication, during publication, and then long after something is published. We also strive to be #1 in customer service. And that sounds cheesy, but it's true. We want to be the people that you remember. And I want everyone to know Martha in my office, Miguel, Julia, all the wonderful people on my team. I want them to be front and center too. I want everyone to know that there's humans behind the peer review process, the production process, etc. We also really focus in on our social media experience. How do we continue to tell the story of the published journal long after that journal has published? We have social media handles. We work really hard on our Instagram, our Twitter. I'm not going to call it X, our LinkedIn. And we're making sure that we can reach as many people as we can in as many ways as possible. And again, that author experience is what we're thinking about all the time. We want to make them feel good with a warm human touch. So I'll tell you a couple of things that we do. I do spend a lot of time following our authors and our community on social media. If I see one of our authors, for instance, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, at the end of the day, that's pretty exciting. We can't compete with the New England Journal of Medicine, and that's awesome. How happy are we for them? So I'll reach out and I'll be like, oh my gosh, congratulations. You are freaking awesome. And what can we do to promote the fact that you are a New England Journal of Medicine? We're going to tweet about it. We're going to feature you on our AUA news platform. And that really helps. People are always taken aback a little bit to get a note like that. And I'll talk about our AUA news platform in just a bit. The other thing is if there's a journal that is a direct competitor of ours and someone publishes there, that is still awesome at the end of the day that they published there. I'll reach out and say, I saw that you published with XYZ. I am so proud of you and that's amazing. What can we do in the future to win you back, to get your business, to work with you again in the future? But in the meantime, that's really well done and that's awesome. At our annual meeting, again, that annual meeting in person, ours is coming up here in May. We always do something fun. And that's what this picture is. This is our editor-in-chief of our flagship journal. He is wearing our infamous pink Journal of Urology fanny pack. Also pictured with him is Dr. Larissa Bressler. She is our chief diversity officer at the AUA. And she works really closely with us too, to involve as many people as we can globally and at all career levels as well. So she has a future program with medical students, and they have now become woven into the body of what we do with our publications. Those are our future authors. And now we've even seen some of our medical students publish with us, which is really exciting. At our meeting, we have selfie stations and hashtags, and our booth is always just buzzing with tons of activity. It's so much fun. We keep the fanny packs tucked underneath the desk. You have to come up and have a conversation with us. And we always say, what can we do better? What do you like that we do? What are some ideas that you have? And that pink fanny pack, I'll tell you what, we have people reach out to us all year long. We've also mended relationships. I had one time an author who had decided she would never publish in an American Urological Association publication ever again. And this is in the time before I worked at the AUA. She stopped by the booth and she let me know, I will never publish with you again. And I said, I totally understand. Can you tell me more about your experience? What led you to saying this? Also, by the way, here's a fanny pack. By the end, we were hugging each other, and I'm proud to say she's published with us several more times after that. Again, the social media all year long, we're paying attention to what's trending in urology, and then we're pulling our authors in to help that trend. I'll give you an example. Brittany Mahomes, who is married to the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champions. She was just out in the news recently talking about the importance of pelvic health. And of course, that's a super important thing to all of us, everyone globally. We can all share in the fact that that is a key thing about our health. So we went scouring through all of our publications, pulled up all of our authors from the past 2 years who have written on that topic, reached out to them, got videos, got statements, and then started a social media campaign around that Brittany Holmes awareness, but then also bringing our actual research into it. Our authors were delighted by this. They're like, what's going on? And we're happy to quickly contribute and have their work resurface again. I mentioned our AUA News platform. I encourage you to check it out, auanews.net. It's not perfect, but it's awesome in our eyes and in our community. We did not have this platform until a year ago. And again, to Paul's point and to drive home what he's saying about that connection throughout the year, that's a place where we can feature author content. So journal insights for every single one of our authors. We use Cactus Communications to use their AI technology to write patient summaries about every single article that we publish in the Journal of Urology. We use AI to read aloud JU insights. So physicians, patients, anyone who wants can listen to that on their drive to work while they're doing their laundry. And we do webinars year round that are focused on journal content and also building content collections around those actual events. I think I probably need to start there. I have about a million other things to talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to those. But I want to make sure that we go on to our next amazing speaker, and I definitely look forward to continuing this conversation. So thank you all.
Thanks, Jennifer. On to Claire from the Company of Biologists to tell us a little bit about your different initiatives. One of my favorite ones is the Forest of Biology. So looking forward to hearing that.
I'm going to talk a little bit about our community sites first, and then I'm definitely getting on to the Forest of Biologists. So we have 3 community sites. 2 of them are associated very closely with 2 of our journals. And they came about because our journals were seen as community journals. And like many publishers watching, we have charitable grants and we have scientific meetings that engage with them. But they came to us and they said, what more can you do to bring the community together? So we decided to launch these community sites, and they're basically where authors can post about their own science, about things that they've been reading, debate the latest controversies. They can talk about public outreach and even the best presents to buy for scientists. So a really sort of good mix. We also decided to add on to these diversity databases. So in these, we have a database of individuals where they self-describe, but the idea was to support the community's efforts in equity, diversity, and inclusion as well. And in launching these community sites, they were really about community with no revenue in mind. So that was how the company felt about engaging with authors. We also have a community site that focuses on preprints. It's called Prelights. And we've built a community of early career researchers. We call them Prelighters. And they write commentaries about the latest preprints in their areas. What they also do is they think about some questions they have about the research and what might come next. And they get in touch with the original author of the original preprint. And the majority of them respond and engage with the conversation, which adds to the content. So it produces a really nice set of content on the site. But what we really love about it is that we're working really closely with incredibly enthusiastic early career researchers. They get experience writing, reviewing other people's papers, and they also build their own networks and visibility, as well as, of course, we hope building some relationship with us. Okay, so let's move on to the Forest of Biologists, which is a biodiversity initiative that we created in partnership with the Woodland Trust. So this first slide, the first part of the project is that we plant a tree for every article published in our journals. It's not a cheap, any old cheap plant a tree scheme. This was quite a significant investment because we were aiming for lasting environmental impact. And with the Woodland Trust, we selected the Young People's Forest in Derbyshire. And this was originally an open cast mine. So this is very much transforming the site into new woodland. And what we really loved as well is that the trees are being planted by young people, and those young people are also involved in making decisions about the future of the site. So there's an education element in there. Who knows, they might become future authors, you never know. And we plant a strong mix of native UK deciduous trees, and we're already seeing a huge impact on biodiversity there. This second location is on behalf of our peer reviewers, we're helping to protect trees in an area of ancient woodland, which is a sort of an ecosystem that's under threat in the UK. And we selected Great Knot Wood in the Lake District National Park overlooking Lake Windermere. And it is absolutely beautiful. It has some old yew trees and it's full of moss and slugs. And it's an absolutely gorgeous location. And again, there's a lot of work to be done. So the Woodland Trust have to very carefully manage light levels throughout the woodland and the removal of non-native species. The third element of the project is that we built a website that was game inspired. It's supposed to be fun. And the idea is that our authors and our reviewers can see a virtual representation of the tree that we've planted or protected for them. They can see which species they've been allocated, which woodland it's in, how to visit the wood if they want to do that. They can tweet their tree. And obviously anyone can go to the site and just see our progress. And it was supposed to be fun. It's supposed to look a bit cartoony. And in fact, we had a bit of lots of fun and hilarity about this site. We had a lot of tweets asking whether the carefully managed wood stacks were in fact stacks of rejected articles. So, you know, authors have absolutely loved engaging with this. It was planned very carefully alongside biologists. So it was proposed by a plant scientist who was one of our editors-in-chief. We also engaged with a group of early career researchers, and all of these conversations really helped shape exactly what we were doing in the project and also how we communicated it. So this is an audience who can be a bit skeptical about potential greenwashing. So it was really important to us to get it right. And the focus is very much on biodiversity and not on carbon offsetting. So we did know that this project would chime with the concerns of biologists worldwide about climate change and biodiversity loss. It is generally accepted that the 6th mass extinction event has already begun. But even though we knew that people would like this project, the feedback has been absolutely extraordinary. And people have made, you know, lots of emojis and lots of fun and silliness. It's been really good fun. We're also really delighted that it's captured the imagination of our library customers and also some of the publishers. So I'll finish there.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I've got loads of questions for all of you, and I'll start with Claire just because you were just talking last. So I've worked with Claire on a brief editorial piece for the UKSG e-News that I co-edited, and the piece was about the forests of biology, and there were some really interesting quotes from authors about it, and I've pulled out 2 of those, and that's really what made me think about that this is related to author experience, because at first sight I didn't really think about it, but there was 2 authors in particular, and one of them said, "I've just found out about this. You get a tree for every paper that you publish. This is so great. Where can I submit?" And the other author said, "What a beautiful initiative from the Company of Biologists. Another fantastic reason to publish with this non-for-profit organization." So it's an initiative that actually drives submissions and it drives, you know, authors to come to you and to submit to you. And that's the whole, you know, idea, to build a place where they feel they can do that. Now, I want to ask you, Claire,
I think that's right.
Was this intentional? Like, was the effect of that intentional? Yeah, we're going to do this, so we'll help authors want to publish with us. Was that initially part of the strategy?
That's a really great question. I think it probably was in the back of our heads. I think when Steve Kelly proposed it, he said that what he wanted to do was that for each paper published, do one tiny little thing that added up to have you know, a bigger impact. But you know, I think we knew that our authors would love this, and if it builds author loyalty, then that is wonderful. We actually do have quite a big sustainability focus, so even from our investments all the way through to, we have a sustainable conferencing initiative where we actually provide funds to people who want to innovate in sustainable conferencing. So we have really focused on sustainability. But even when we were discussing this with the board of directors, there were directors saying, "I'm already looking to see which paper I can publish with you because I want a tree." So yes, that, you know, that is definitely something that we were hoping for.
Great.
And also a non-financial reward for reviewers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reviewers and as well as published articles, which is great. And I've run past one of those forests. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But similar question to you, Jennifer. How did you, like, what element did strategy and planning have with your current philosophy, you know, and you didn't really talk about the pink thing very much, but that has become your thing. People recognize you. It makes you, like you were saying in the prep call, it makes people feel like they can approach you. Did you plan this? Did you just say, I think this is going to be my strategy? How much planning was there, and how much of this has evolved along the way that you said we want to be really approachable?
On the hand of, we have a lot of work that we do in my team. So that's all super planned, super strategic, super done. For this author approach, I have to tell you, there's not a lot of planning that goes into it. It's just like a vibe, seat of the pants, and I come in hot. That's just kind of how I am, what my personality is like. And so pink has always been my favorite color. And just coming in and saying, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. Let's do it. And having editorial board members who are really willing. When I started in 2020, our ed board met one time a year for 1 hour and didn't even speak to one another. They were ready to go. And I'm like, come on, guys, we got to go get these authors, and we've got to make them feel good. And then just being prepared and being ready and being open to ideas. So I'll give you an example in that regard that I didn't mention in my 1,000 hour spiel leading into this, is our Journal of Urology covers can be a little boring. Like there's it's hard to select images for a cover for the Journal of Urology. So I'll just leave it there. And so my editor and I were talking about, okay, so how can we address this? So next thing you know, there is this woman I follow on Twitter, and she's a medical student, and she is the most amazing ever illustrator. So I said, okay, Dr. Siemens, our editor, do you trust me? And he was like, yeah, I think so. No, I'm just kidding. He was like, yeah, no, I trust you. So I said, this is the article we want to feature on the cover of the Journal of Urology. I said, Sarah, would you take a look at it and would you illustrate a cover? So she was like, okay. And so she illustrated the most beautiful cover in the world, and it was featured on the cover of the Journal of Urology. Well, then it continues on, and then you just never could imagine what was going to come next from this. What happened next is that her residency interviews were coming up. So she had a framed Journal of Urology cover that she illustrated to start off every single conversation for her 20+ interviews for residency, hanging on the wall behind her during those Zoom calls. And then she ended up matching at her home program where she wanted to be. And then also since then has authored for us on our AUA News platform and has all of these plans for her research and how she plans to continue her authorship journey with us. Since then, though, now other medical students have reached out and they're like, hey, I'm here. I would love to do this too. So we are now on our 3rd medical student featured on the cover of the journal. And it's just been this really great, unique way. And then one other story too, involving the pink. The pink, you know, kind of grew slowly but surely. I've always had the pink thing, so that's been since I was tiny. But with urology, it took a little bit of a while for it to catch on. But one of the most meaningful things that happened to me at our meeting last year, again, to Paul's point about why meetings and connections are so important, is the Society of Women in Urology said, we really want you to come to our meeting this year. And so I came in and almost every single woman in that room was wearing hot pink. And they said, we never felt like we could wear this color or any vibrant colors to a medical meeting where only 10% of urologists are female. And so again, just kind of having that spirit and trying things and being open and really genuinely wanting to connect with people, I think that is an important part of that community engagement.
And it goes to what, Paul, I don't know if you said it now or another time that I've heard you speak about, you can't substitute that having a beer with someone during a live event. Is that kind of personal connection that is so important and a kind of one-to-one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, when the pandemic first occurred and people said, you know, virtual will never work, I said, in some ways, you're right. And the line that you're semi-quoting is the line that I use frequently, which is, there's certain things in life we should never digitize. Falling in love is one of them. And then that moment with your colleague having a beer is the other. So that hasn't changed my mind, but I think about how we engage with our community in a broad way. And I think that it's not, the problem that we have And if we go way, way back and we think historically about it, and we look at the origins of where the journal came from and the origins of the conference came from, like, let's face it, it was a lot easier to ship some paper around the world back in the 50s than it was to ship people. And
Mhm.
then, you know, it was much more efficient to bring a small cohort of people together to discuss their early stage work. And let's admit, it's their early stage work together rather than writing letters. Okay, this is pre-email. And so that's sort of where these things originated from. But, you know, nothing will sacrifice that beer. And I don't think it should. That's why I think, I mean, we have climate change challenges ahead of us, absolutely. I think we need to travel less. I don't think it makes sense to send PhD students doing a poster across the Atlantic to present a poster to come back. I don't think that that's a good use of their time. I don't think it's a good use of carbon. I think that what we should focus on is creating experiential moments, you know, that create the memories, all the things that Jennifer is talking about. Have those conversations at the booth that she's talking about, have those moments. But I think, you know, if our role as societies is to disseminate and showcase and highlight researchers, well, then we just don't have to do that on 2 days of the year, and we should be doing it 52 weeks of the year. And that's why, you know, what's been really interesting for me in the post-pandemic world is I assumed the vision that I had for that one big event, loads of small events, that the events people would jump at that. And in fact, I've sort of been disappointed that they haven't. But sort of to my surprise, instead, what I find is I talk to a lot of publishing people who tell me, oh, I'm thinking about setting up my own events team. Don't tell the events people, because they don't really get us. And all I want to do is run journal clubs, and I want to create informal meetings like what we're having right now, because I want to be in the place for my authors. And ultimately, I want them to select our journals when they're submitting to us. So no, we're never going to replace the magic moment of the beer. But I think there's nothing wrong with having connections with the beer and without the beer too.
And I think during the pandemic, there was these like fake virtual mingling rooms where people were having fake beers. Didn't quite work though, didn't it?
No, and I think that what you need to look at there, and I refuse to build those things in our platform. I also refuse to build the booths that sort of exhibitors would want, because I said it's utterly pointless. I think that you have two different mediums, and there are certain things that work well in this. So like me speaking to you right now, sharing an idea, that works, you know, delivering content, ideas, findings, that all works in a remote way. That's why we kind of work remotely. But the connection piece doesn't, and it depends. And you need to think of your events and your events program within that lens of like, when do I want to bring people together and bind, and when do I want to share information? And I think the best, I mean, like Rami, look, we meet at regular, you know, industry events, and so there are our touch points, but then we engage throughout the year, and that's the same model that I'm following. It's how I operate my company. We're a fully remote company, but we bring everyone together once a year, and I think the same applies for meetings for societies.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about getting author feedback. We've talked about direct engagement, Jennifer talking at the booth with people, direct emails. What other ways do you use to get feedback from authors about how they're feeling or how you can improve things within your organization? Are you doing surveys? Are you, Jennifer, you talked about social media, look at where people publish. What other places, other mediums are you using?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that we're working on right now, and it has been a dagger to the heart, but much needed, is a peer review overhaul project, which is pretty ambitious. And I'm a big fan of Go Big or Go Home. And so I'm working on this with some Journal of Urology editorial board members, and we want to revolutionize urological peer review within 3 years. But we have surveyed all of our constituencies involved with peer review, but in that we surveyed our authors. And wow. So yes, that was a painful process, but I also believe these folks were super honest, super transparent, super really generous with their feedback. So it was, a survey, obviously with, just with scaled responses, but then also we left a lot of open-ended opportunities, and people were like typing away. I don't know that they would have done that if we didn't have those connections. Of course, it was all anonymous, but I still feel like a little bit more engaged than normally they would have been. And that has really allowed us to
the
make
questions open-ended?
So yeah, we left space on everyone to,
Right.
share open-ended feedback. And from this, of course, we looked at all of that scoring, but then we were really looking at all of those open-ended responses. And that's allowed us to make some pretty immediate changes in our peer review process. I just said, you know what, we're throwing this in the trash. I walked into the fact of you have to have all of these submission requirements. Now we're basically like, just submit your paper. We don't care if it's still addressed to the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. We don't care if it's addressed to the European Urology editor. We don't care what format this is in. Just submit. Make your life easier. We will work on it if you get accepted, and have tried to cut down on, we were sending things back for to get revised that were just absolutely absurd and ridiculous. And so we've condensed all of the amounts of revisions that we were asking for. So in other words, yes, just trying to really listen and pay attention to what people are saying. I mean, that's just one example. Other examples, though, again, these silly swag things, my silly social media presence, all of that makes people write to me and say, look, this is a real problem for me. You guys did something X, Y, and Z. Can we talk about it? Or they're writing to me and saying, I have a pre-submission inquiry. Here's my article idea. Here are the data I have, whatever the case might be. Can you help me find a good home for this this research? And then that allows me to collaborate with our editors and say, would you give this article a chance under review? And it's just made things a lot more cohesive, a lot of back and forth conversation that, quite honestly, none of that was happening when I started, to the point where many of my days are largely consumed with these conversations, which I think is really important. And people talk, word gets then out on the street that we are willing to do that.
And what other social media? You mentioned LinkedIn, Twitter, X. What else do you use to engage with authors?
We also do Facebook, which I think is kind of lame, but also Instagram. That's huge. And so we do a lot of video stuff. And we have a really fun social media. Shout out to Travis if he's here by any chance, one of my colleagues, and he's great with video and just has a really good vision for what I'm trying to do as well. But again, this is just built organically. We didn't really go into it with a plan. It's just what feels good. And sometimes we try things and they don't work, and we're pretty good at pulling the plug on them as well. And then some people too, we just know they might not want to give a video. So we'll ask them for something else. Give us a visual abstract. Help us out. What can we do to help you promote yourself and your work?
That's great. What about you, Paul? How do you get, how do societies that work with your platform, do they survey authors during the process, during conferences, during events? How do you get feedback directly?
Well, I suppose it depends on the feedback you're looking to capture. I mean, if you're looking to capture feedback about a tool, about a platform, about an experience, about a conference, about a webinar, there's of course there are surveys for that. When I look at your question, I look at it in a different frame though, because right now we have 5 people with mics open that can have conversations and can give sort of feedback without the structure. And we could go anywhere with this. And like you've seen that here today. And one of the things, if I just go back to the function of a conference or a meeting or a webinar or whatever, is that we become very fixated on the journal. And like, I love what Jennifer is saying, is just send us your research in whatever shape or form it is. And what I think is great about conferences is that they're on the opposite end of the spectrum, so that in terms of the feedback you're talking about, I would frame that as, what conversation do you want to have? And I think conferences, because of their unstructured makeup, can allow for conversations in any way, shape, or form. It can be 2 people, it could be a group of people, it could be 50 people, it could be a fishbowl. There's so many different formats that you can look at. But also, I think that because the conference is less structured and less rigorous, the outputs that come from conferences, sometimes you'll see somebody who has tried something and hasn't quite worked out, or is looking for feedback on it. Early career researcher posters is another example. Like, there's a whole corpus of insights there. If you're looking for feedback as a scholarly community, looking for the insights and the feedback about what's coming next. And I think conferences, like, if you go to the sessions that are really busy, you're going to see the hot topics. If you look at the early career researchers that are scoring highly in their submissions, they're the up and coming stars. you know, so there's so many data points and signals. So actually, I look at the question that you answered. Actually, the other one that I saw a comment earlier on in the conversation thread about selling. Are people are afraid of selling? Well, you know, whether we like it or not, societies are little businesses as well, right? And so your customers or your community, they need to engage with you, if you want to use that word, for you to survive. And so we need to have our communities. And one of the ways that I'm trying to help societies to think about, back to your point on feedback, is that if you're doing a good job for your community or for your customers, they keep coming back. But how do you measure that? And so, you can measure how many people, right? I'm sure how many people have turned up to every Kronos Hub webinar they're the people who are really engaged with you and your content. And I think we as societies need to think about that and need to look at ways that we can identify, our community, our audience, and who are the people who are really engaging with us, who are coming to our webinars, who are submitting to our conferences, who are submitting to our journals. Who are those people that are engaging with us? Because those that fall off the wheel, I love what Jennifer's saying about writing semi-handwritten notes to them, because that's where we need interventions. And we need to look at, sorry to use the sales term, a funnel of all of that community, and making sure that people who are falling off the bandwagon are coming back on. And one way, events, because it's a huge data sensor, we can use that data to identify who needs help, who needs a nudge, where are we doing well, what conference is doing well, what workshops are doing well, and so forth. Anyway, that's how, to answer your question about how do I get feedback, I think that's how we can use events for feedback.
For feedback, that's a good question, a good answer. And do you, Claire and Jennifer, do you look at data like within your readership like that, not just asking for feedback, but also, do people come back and submit, and I'm maybe approaching those that haven't come back in a different way to encourage them, hey, I'm going to plant a tree if you publish with us, to lure them into that?
Yeah, so we do that. I think that we obviously recognize repeat author because you get to know them, their names, and you use them as peer reviewers. And one of the things that we really love is when someone then becomes so close to the journal, they become an associate editor and then an editor, and they get more involved. But it can be quite difficult as well. So I mean, one of the things that we often struggle with is if we do a special issue, we quite often attract some new authors that perhaps haven't published with us before, and so we do like to track whether that means that they're going to stay with us. But that's quite difficult because we've probably picked a topic that's a newish hot topic. So is it just that then there are authors that are now publishing in a new field, and that obviously comes to you? So it can be quite difficult to track that. But I think that one of the things that's not really being talked about very openly is that there's a huge drop in submissions and published numbers across most journals in most subject areas from most publishers. And so I think that that's why author engagement is particularly hot at the moment. We've always done it, but at the moment it's particularly important. And it takes an effort to attract a new author. Of course, you try to do that, but keeping your loyal authors is much easier. You need to make sure you give them a really great author experience, and that's what both Jennifer and Paul are talking about, is this great experience. They'll keep coming back. So we do regular author surveys, but one of the things that we really like to do is just we actually we've tried to do this rigorously, is that when someone emails us with a comment, we capture the comment and we add it to a file, and we just keep a record of all of those things. And the in-house staff really love it because it motivates them. But there's another thing which Jennifer touched on, which is it's easy-ish to get good feedback, but what you actually need to get is the bad feedback. And I remember quite early in my career, my boss saying to me, look, people don't want to say nasty things to you, so you're going to have to work really hard to get them to tell you what they don't like about the journal or the process. And so and I've really taken that to heart. And so I think that that's one of the things that we also try to focus on, those open-ended questions. What would you do differently? How would you change the journal? How would you change the process? That's really important too.
And we have a question on that about how you handle angry authors, either in a public space or in person or virtual. I'm
happy to take that. So I'm super proud of bad feedback. And so what I mean by that is I don't want you just to vanish with no explanation and then we can't turn you up. I want you to come to me and vent, and I will talk to you. And you all might have seen me. I do this all the time. Like, people will come on Twitter with a bad experience or a negative question or this, I'll engage that right there on Twitter transparently and openly, or email me, or folks text me even, and I am happy, always happy to come, you know, to a better understanding. And to the data question, I tend to measure with my heart, which, you know, like in cooking, but that is really important to really allow people to give actual feedback and to really collect actual data. So I will tell you that we are going to be doing focus groups at our upcoming annual meeting in May, where we are going to sit down with authors and say, what do you think a JU paper is? What do you think about the author experience here? And really do that. We have a person on staff who actually does that professionally. So we do have that luxury to do that. I know many organizations don't, but we're going to take advantage of that. And I just want to say one thing too, because I see James Butcher asking this question, and he's my idol and he's the best. I love you, James Butcher. But anyway, his question is about readership. And I really see these groups all as entwined. I feel like good reviewers are excellent readers, are also our authors because they're really good writers. That all those good ones eventually become your editor. So I feel like those groups are also entwined. So when you're thinking really passionately about one, it then benefits the other. And then when you're looking at the feedback, I told you we're doing that peer review work. We surveyed all of those constituencies. And then when they all came back, they all had the same complaints that were overlapping: lack of transparency, lack of feedback, lack of understanding of the process. Okay, well, we can fix all of those things. And also, it's so intertwined that it's not even funny. So again, just paying attention to what people think and believe is super important, in my opinion.
Rami, could I pick up on a point that Claire made a second ago? And I think she's right. You know, the number of submissions to journals falling. This is a conversation. Obviously, we're not in the journal submission piece, but when we think about author experience and we think about the author journey and their experience with, and how conferences link to journals, there's a piece of research that has indicated that 37% of all conference content that's published at a conference ends up in a journal in its eventual form within 2 years. This that might sort of blow your mind, that statistic, but it actually makes a lot of sense when I break it down. So, you know, if I'm an early career researcher and I'm doing some research on tea, it's likely I'm going to have a journal article, you know, within a year or two, and that the likelihood is it's going to be about tea, and it's going to be with largely the same authors that did the initial submission with me, and that conferences in many ways are the initial launch pad for earlier career researchers. It's where they'll first pop up on the radar before they're even ready to go to the journal. So we're working with societies in ways that we can help either directly. So if a piece of research is good enough or could be nurtured along to become a journal, so that's kind of like a direct submission from the conference submission process into the journal submission process. And we're working with a number of the known logos in terms of how that might work out. So that's sort of direct. And then there's the indirect, which is, you know, how do we nurture those people who initially sort of put their hand up and say, hey, I'm here, a little bit sheepish, and I'm working on this, but eventually they're going to want to submit with you. And how do we nurture them along that journey so that they stay with us rather than going off to some other publisher that isn't? And that's what, in my introduction, when I talked about Netflix as my home, you know, that experience is important, right? From that very first moment where they stood out and said, hey, we're here, this is my research, to eventually publishing with you in their journal. So I just wanted to pick up on that. And that is a real problem that I'm hearing as well on the conference side, as people try to leverage conference content to drive a solution to that problem.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, and you hadn't mentioned that. I've got a question for both Claire and Jennifer. As you're both relatively small publishers, do you feel it's easier to come up with things and get consensus across your organization if you have an idea for an innovative author experience idea or something in that line? Is it easier to get consensus, do you think?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the personality of the company, and I mean, you know, as an organization. So when I first joined the company of biologists, our official approach was let other people do the experiments, we'll see which ones work, and then we'll copy them. So it wasn't to innovate at all. And now we innovate a lot. And I think, yes, it is easier to get people on board, but I think it's because we've all agreed that we want to be innovative. I think in a small organization where you don't want to be innovative, still an idea would come up and everyone would poo-poo it. So I think you need to have like created the fertile ground for planting the seeds to continue the forest idea. I think that's really, really important. So we looked at our risk register and how much risk we were prepared to take, and where we wanted to act. We have things like, I know there's been a discussion about platforms. We have a WeChat channel. We put a reasonable amount of work into that because we thought it was a really important audience. We've launched a Mastodon server, so not just an account, but a Mastodon server where it's called Biologists. Or any biologist, whether individuals or groups can join us on there. So woo Mastodon. I think it's about trying lots of things. The difficulty in being a small organization, I think, is that the workload can grow because you see lots of things you want to do, and you maybe don't have the strictness to monitor. Choosing 1 of 10 ideas, you might still do 3 of the 10 ideas. Whereas when I worked at a larger publisher, we would nip things in the bud more quickly, I think, if they were taking up too much resource.
What about you, Jennifer? And maybe you can talk a little bit as well about I don't want to say not independent, but as a society publishing with a larger publisher. Something that we've discussed in previous webinars on author experience was how much control you have over the data, because some of your workflows are through another publisher. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well.
So as far as the AUA goes, I am sure that many more intelligent people than me applied for this job, but I think I was the personality hire. In fact, I've been told that. And so, you know what, that is exactly what I want to hear. And that is great. And so I got to start from that advantage, which was really good. And then as far as our publisher goes, we work with Wolters Kluwer, and they've been a tremendous support to us. They're amazing, but you have to think about your publisher. They are not the solution to your answers. It's not like, okay, now we're partnered with Wolters Kluwer, LOL, I'm just going to go take a nap while they do all the work. It is being married. We are married to Wolters Kluwer, and they better be taking the kids to daycare and scrubbing the floors and doing the laundry if I'm making the beds and raking the leaves and doing the grocery shopping. I mean, it is a give and a take. And also sometimes I'm going to take the kids to daycare, so you better get out there and rake the leaves. I mean, we need to be talking about who does what. They are marketing on our behalf, but they are marketing and pushing different things than what we are doing. They also have different tools than what we have access to. So they do amazing things for us all the time. They're global marketing for us. Their access to Clarivate and other tools that we just don't have that access to, or that understanding of how to use. They meet with me about this, but then we have an amazing person at Wolters Kluwer. Her name is Michelle Rothenberg, in case she's on here, who's like, okay, here's all these ideas, and that's stuff that we are just not going to do at the AUA. But then I don't expect Michelle Rothenberg then to be figuring out every single one of our authors on a granular level. There's just no chance. She doesn't know our people like we know our people. That is my job and our job at the AUA. So that's the big difference, and constantly having those conversations. But I'll tell you, when I reach out to Wolters Kluwer and I'm like, I need data to support my next wild and crazy idea. And they're like, okay, we have our popcorn. We're ready for this one. And here's your data. Or I'll say, I need you to be ready with these data when the time comes. And to Claire's point, one about WeChat, we have no way to just go running out and doing WeChat on our own. But I went to Wolters Kluwer and said, hey, can you help us with WeChat with a presence? They're like, say less. And they translate our journal insights for us. They translate meeting content, membership content, and they give us the metrics on those. The interaction on every single one of those posts is insane. It's crazy. And what we try to focus most on, for instance, is the articles I'll have translated are ones where we have Chinese authorship. It makes sense. And so we're just trying to try different things, and they're always game and always, always, always willing to help us. But that is up to me to come to them with that, just like they're coming to me with certain things that they're seeing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's some really good ideas there for other societies in that position. And that's actually one of the reasons I asked that is because I looked at who attended the previous webinar, and there are quite a lot of societies that publish via a larger publisher, and we get questions around that. So thanks for sharing those tips. I can't believe the time has flown and it's nearly time to finish up. So I have one last question to each of you. Clearly, you touched on this a little bit already. You said one of the reasons there's this focus and shift on author experience is because submissions are dropping. So my question to the other two, and you again as well, Claire, what do you think the reason is for this focus on author experience?
Yeah, so I think it's always been there. I think that a lot of people talk about whether there's a new relationship with moving to open access, and but I personally don't think that has changed our relationship with authors. We've tried to really keep money out of it, and so I don't think that has changed our relationship a great deal. I think that during the pandemic, I think that we were kinder to authors. We realized they couldn't go into the lab easily and do lots of revisions. And so we started being kinder during the revision process. And so I think that has just changed a little bit about our thinking. And then I think just this focus on retaining loyal authors is important. Company of Biologists is going to be 100 years old next year, so we're planning a big celebration, and we just love the fact that the community keeps coming to us with stories about how we launched and things like that. And so I think there's going to be a lot more of that. That's why we're focusing on it a lot at the moment. The drop-in submissions, yes, but also because we're actually trying to engage more with our community to have a really amazing party in 2025, where I'm already working on the cocktail names.
Brilliant. What about you, Paul? Did you see a shift? Is it the pandemic? Obviously, for you, it's going virtual.
Controversial. I'm going to disagree with Claire. Sorry. So I won't name names, but one publisher told me in the old days we wanted less submissions because more submissions meant more paper, meant more shipping, and therefore we didn't want them. And then, not even the pandemic, but everything's now digital. Therefore, we can take as many papers, we can tape as many pages. And I'm being somewhat cynical here. Because we're driving an APC model, I want more submissions and find a way to give me more submissions. And so that's prompted some conversations. Why can you help me get more of my conference submissions into my journal? And I'm not going to name names again because I don't want them going over there because they're stealing my submissions. And I'm like, I hear you loud and clear. So essentially, you want a better author experience. You want a better way of tracking your authors, maintaining that connection with them so that you can spot them before the others do. And then you can ensure that they submit with you. Because right now, if you're driving an APC model, essentially those APCs is your lifeblood. So that's my controversial antidote to Claire. Apologies, Claire.
Thanks, Paul. What about you, Jennifer?
Well, I don't think the author experience is new. I think everyone wants to be a part of a community. They want to feel seen, heard, especially after the pandemic and lockdown and just everything being so disjointed and the world has gotten so ugly. If you can provide a place, I know we work really closely with our editorial boards. Even when someone gets a rejection letter, our authors will write back to us and say, I feel so loved this rejection. Thank you so much for this rejection. Really working to make people feel like they are seen and heard and respected. And then to Claire's point about the cocktails, this year at our annual meeting, we're doing the P's Knees instead of the Bee's Knees. In the fall, we did one called You're in Heaven, and they're always like slightly yellowish in color. So just wanted to let you know the cocktail idea is great. And if you're having receptions with editors and leaders of your publications, always invite top authors because they love to be seen and feel part of that community, of that editorial leadership. So we always make sure we do that too.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I think that's a perfect example of great author experience if you can have, a positive reaction to a rejection, because it's not about just keeping authors happy and giving them what they want, but making the experience a positive one, even if that's a negative, decision on their paper. So not much left for me to say. I know there's some unanswered question. Thank you everyone who participated and put information in the chat. If you want to be kept up to date with the Kronos Hub news and events, I've got a webinar in May that's not been finalized yet, but we'll be announcing once everything is final. And we've just got some conferences coming up. I'll be at UKSG and then later at SSP in May as well. I forgot to add that on here. And here's everyone's email addresses. Jennifer, I saw you put yours in the chat. So if you have any other questions or want to engage in a conversation or a video chat with one of our speakers, please get in touch with them. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Or if you have any questions for me or want to chat with me, my details are here as well. So thanks everyone for joining. And thank you so much, Claire, Jennifer, and Paul, for taking part in our webinar today. It was great having you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
time.
Thank you
Thanks
so
to
much.
everybody.
Zoom. Take care.
Bye.